The karate champion's fist came at him like a bullet, fast, precise, deadly. But Steven Seagal didn't even blink, one move, 1 second. And the sound that followed made the entire dojo go silent. Peop. The champion collapsed to the floor, his arm twisted at an angle that shouldn't exist, his face frozen in shock and pain. He had trained his whole life for this moment. Black belt at 16, tournament champion, undefeated in 47 professional matches across 3 countries. They called him the Tokyo Demon. But he didn't know one thing: Aikido doesn't fight force with force. It redirects it. It uses your own power to destroy you. And what happened in the next 35 minutes changed everything he thought he knew about strength, respect, and martial arts. This isn't just a fight story. This is the true account of ego meeting wisdom, of arrogance meeting humility, of a man who walked into a dojo to prove Steven Seagal was a fraud and walked out crippled, humbled, and forever changed. Because sometimes, the hardest lessons don't come from winning. They come from being broken by someone who never wanted to break you in the first place. You're about to witness the moment a master reminded the world why real power doesn't need to prove itself. Why the most dangerous people are the calmest. And why respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. Before we go on, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? And have you ever seen someone get humbled in real life? Someone who thought they were untouchable until reality hit them hard. Let's hear your stories. I read every single comment, and if you believe that true strength is silent, type res pesti and let me know you're ready for this journey. Because what you're about to see isn't just about martial arts, it's about life. Let's begin. It was 1988. Los Angeles, summer heat hanging thick in the air, a private dojo tucked between palm trees and concrete, far from the glitz of Hollywood, far from the noise of the city. Steven Seagal had just finished teaching a small group of students, business people, actors, a few off-duty cops, quiet. Focused, no cameras, no spectators, no ego. This wasn't a McDojo selling black belts for cash. This was a place where people came to learn real Aikido. The art of peace. The art of ending conflict without creating more violence. Steven wiped the sweat from his brow, bowed to his students, and was about to dismiss the class. Then the door slammed open, bang, every head turned. A man stood in the doorway, mid-20s, lean but muscular, wearing a pristine white gi that looked like it had never touched dirt. Black belt tied perfectly around his waist. His posture was rigid, chest out, eyes sharp and calculating. His name was Takeshi Yamada, Japanese karate champion, 28 years old. Trained since he was 6 under some of the toughest senseis in Tokyo. He had competed in tournaments across Japan, Korea, and Thailand, 47 victories, 0 defeats. They called him the Tokyo Demon, because when he stepped into the ring, people got hurt. But Takeshi hadn't come to Los Angeles for tourism. He had come because he heard rumors. There's an American teaching Aikido in LA, claims he trained in Japan for 15 years. Says he can take down anyone without throwing a single punch. Says his art is superior. Takeshi didn't believe it. He believed martial arts was about one thing: dominance, speed, power, precision, breaking your opponent before they break you. And he wanted to prove that Steven Seagal was just another fraud selling Eastern mysticism to gullible Westerners. He stepped into the dojo, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. "I came to challenge you," Takeshi said in heavily accented English, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The students froze. Some looked nervous, others curious, a few excited. Steven turned slowly, calm, no anger, no tension in his face, just quiet observation. "I don't do challenges," Steven said evenly. Takeshi's jaw tightened. "Then you're afraid?" A few students gasped. Nobody talked to Steven like that. But Steven just smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid. I just don't need to prove anything. In Japan." Takeshi stepped closer, his fists clenched. "We respect only those who earn it. Words mean nothing. Show me what you can do, or admit you're just another fake sensei selling dreams." Steven studied him for a long moment. He could have asked him to leave. Could have called security. Could have ignored him completely. But he saw something in Takeshi's eyes. Not just arrogance. Not just anger, desperation. A man trying to prove his worth through violence, because that's the only language he'd ever been taught. Steven had seen it before. Young fighters so obsessed with being the best that they forgot why they started training in the first place. "All right," Steven said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "But understand this, what I do isn't about winning. It's about ending the fight before it starts." Takeshi smirked. "We'll see." He began stretching his shoulders, rolling his neck, cracking his knuckles. The confidence of a man who had never truly lost. Steven didn't stretch, didn't warm up, didn't even change his stance. He just stood there, relaxed, centered, breathing slowly. One of the students, a middle-aged woman who had been training for years, leaned over to her friend and whispered, "This isn't going to end well." "For who?" Her friend whispered back, "For the guy who doesn't know what he just walked into." Takeshi finished his warm-up and walked to the center of the dojo. "No rules," he said. "Full contact. First one who can't continue loses." Steven nodded. "If that's what you want." They stood 10 feet apart. The air in the room grew heavy. Students backed against the walls. Someone quietly pulled out their phone to record. Takeshi bowed, quick, formal, respectful in tradition but not in spirit. Steven bowed deeper, slower, with intention. "Whenever you're ready," Steven said. Takeshi's eyes narrowed, and then everything exploded. "Drop a comment right now. Do you think Steven should have just walked away? Or was this lesson necessary? Type Welka Wawai or take him. I want to see what you believe." Takeshi didn't wait. The moment Steven finished speaking, he exploded forward. A sharp front kick aimed directly at Steven's midsection, fast, powerful, precise. The kind of kick that could crack ribs, collapse lungs, end fights in seconds. But it never landed. Steven stepped offline. Just barely. A subtle shift of his hips, a gentle angle change, and as Takeshi's leg extended past him, Steven's hand came up, not to block but to redirect. A soft touch on the ankle, a slight push that used Takeshi's own momentum. Takeshi stumbled forward, his balance broken for just a moment. But he was good. Really good. He recovered instantly, planting his foot and spinning into a vicious back fist aimed at Steven's temple. Again, Steven moved, a slight turn of his torso. The fist sailed past his face by inches, cutting through empty air. The students watching held their breath. Takeshi's eyes widened slightly, not from fear, from confusion. He had thrown 2 of his best strikes, both perfect in form, both fast enough to land on anyone else. But Steven wasn't blocking, wasn't countering, wasn't even sweating. He was just not there when the strikes arrived. "Stop running," Takeshi shouted, frustration creeping into his voice. Steven's expression didn't change. "I'm not running," he said softly. "I'm waiting." That made Takeshi angrier. His breathing became heavier. His shoulders tensed. His ego started to crack. In all his years of competition, no one had made him look slow. No one had made him feel like he was fighting a ghost. He decided to overwhelm Steven with volume. Jab, cross, roundhouse kick, elbow strike, knee thrust, a combination designed to destroy. 5 attacks in 3 seconds. The kind of assault that had knocked out opponents in tournaments across Asia. But Steven flowed like water around a rock. Every strike missed by a hair's width. Not because he was faster, he wasn't. Not because he was stronger, he definitely wasn't trying to be. But because he was reading Takeshi's body before the attacks even launched. Aikido isn't about blocking, it's about blending. About becoming one with your opponent's energy and then redirecting it. Takeshi was fighting with everything he had, and Steven was dancing. One of the students whispered to another, "He's not even trying yet." Takeshi heard it, and it made his blood boil. "You're good at dodging?" Takeshi panted, sweat now dripping down his face. "But can you actually fight, or are you just going to run all day?" Steven stopped moving. For the first time, he stood completely still, arms relaxed at his sides. Wise, calm. "I don't fight," Steven said quietly. "I end conflict." "Then end this?" Takeshi roared, and he charged. Full commitment. No hesitation. No defense. A straight punch aimed directly at Steven's throat, designed to crush the windpipe, end the fight. Prove his dominance once and for all. It was the kind of strike you only throw when you're willing to seriously hurt someone. And that's when Steven finally moved with intent. His eyes sharpened. His body shifted. And in the fraction of a second before impact, everyone in that room knew Takeshi had just made a terrible mistake. Because when you attack with no defense, when you commit everything to one strike, when ego blinds you to danger, you give a master exactly what he needs to end you. Steven didn't step back, he stepped forward. Into the strike, his hand shot out, intercepted Takeshi's wrist mid-punch, and in one fluid motion he rotated, blended, redirected. Takeshi's own momentum became his enemy. His feet left the ground, his body twisted in mid-air. And the students watching knew they were about to witness something they'd never forget. Time seemed to slow down. Takeshi's eyes went wide, not with anger anymore, but with genuine fear. Because for the first time in his entire fighting career, he realized He wasn't in control, Steven was. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing, he could do to stop what was about to happen. The hardwood floor rushed up to meet him, and all his strength, all his speed, all his years of training, meant nothing. It happened in less than 2 seconds. But to everyone watching, it felt like slow motion. As Takeshi's fist came forward, full speed, full commitment, full rage, Steven stepped in, not away. Into the attack, he caught Takeshi's wrist mid-strike with his left hand, firm but not crushing. Then he rotated his entire body, hips, shoulders, feet, all moving as one unit, and he used Takeshi's own forward momentum against him, one smooth, effortless motion, a wrist lock, a pivot, a controlled throw. Ikkyo, the first principle of Aikido, and suddenly Takeshi was airborne, his feet left the ground, his body rotated in the air, his eyes went wide with shock. He hit the hardwood floor hard, his shoulder slamming into the wood with a dull, sickening thud that echoed through the entire dojo. TD, the students gasped. Some covered their mouths. One person's phone slipped from their hand. But Steven didn't let go. He followed Takeshi down to the floor, maintaining the wrist lock, controlling the arm, applying just enough pressure to completely immobilize him. Takeshi's face was pressed against the wood. His arm extended at an unnatural angle, his shoulder screaming in pain. He tried to pull away, tried to roll out, tried to use his strength, but every movement made it worse. "Stop," Steven said calmly, his voice quiet but firm, "or I'll have to hurt you." But Takeshi's pride wouldn't let him quit. He had never tapped out, never surrendered, never admitted defeat, not in 47 professional matches, not once in his entire life. "I won't submit," Takeshi growled through gritted teeth. "Then you leave me no choice," Steven said softly. He adjusted the angle of the lock, added just a fraction more pressure, and that's when it happened. Pop. Not a break, but a dislocation. Takeshi's shoulder came partially out of its socket, the ball of the joint separating from the shoulder blade just enough to send white, hot pain shooting through his entire body. He screamed, a raw, primal sound of agony and shock and disbelief. Steven immediately released him and stepped back. The room went dead silent. Takeshi lay on the floor, clutching his arm, breathing hard, his face twisted in pain. Sweat poured down his forehead. Tears streamed from his eyes, not just from the physical pain, but from something deeper, humiliation, devastation. He had trained for 22 years, won dozens of tournaments, beaten fighters twice his size. He was the Tokyo Demon, undefeated, unstoppable, and it took one move to shatter everything he believed about himself. Steven knelt beside him, his face filled with genuine concern. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You didn't stop when I asked." Takeshi looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. "Why?" he wheezed. "Why did you apologize?" Steven's expression softened. "Because I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted you to understand." "Understand what?" "That strength without control is just violence. And violence without purpose is just ego." One of the students, a former paramedic, rushed over and knelt beside Takeshi, his shoulders dislocated. She said, examining the joint carefully, "We need to get him to a hospital." "No," Takeshi gasped. "No hospital." Everyone looked at him confused. He was clearly in pain. His arm hung at an awkward angle. Moving it even slightly made him wince, but he didn't want to leave. "Why not?" the paramedic asked. Takeshi's voice was barely a whisper. "Because I need to know." "Know what?" Steven asked. Takeshi forced himself into a sitting position, his good arm supporting his weight, his injured shoulder throbbing with every heartbeat, and then he did something no one in that room expected. He bowed his head, not in defeat, in respect. "Teach me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, teach me what you know." The students looked at each other in shock. This was the man who had walked in 15 minutes ago, arrogant, aggressive, demanding a fight. And now he sat on the floor, injured, humbled, asking the man who hurt him to become his teacher. Steven studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled gently. "First," Steven said, "we fix your shoulder, then we talk." Steven helped Takeshi to his feet carefully, gently, supporting his weight while being mindful of the injured shoulder. "I can reset your shoulder here," Steven said, "or we can go to the hospital. Your choice." Takeshi winced, his face still pale from pain, but his voice was steady. "Hair, I trust you," the students murmured among themselves. This was the same man who had challenged Steven, called him a fraud, demanded a fight, and now he was putting his body, his injured, vulnerable body, in Steven's hands. Steven nodded. "Sit on that bench. Stay calm." He positioned himself behind Takeshi, placing one hand firmly on the shoulder blade, the other gripping the upper arm. "This will hurt for a second," Steven said quietly. "Then it'll feel better. I need you to breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth." Takeshi closed his eyes and breathed. "In, out, out." "Good," Steven said. "I'm going to count down from 3. On 1, I'll reset it. Don't tense up. Trust the process." 3. Takeshi's breathing quickened slightly. 2. His good hand gripped the edge of the bench. 1. Snap. A quick controlled motion and the shoulder popped back into place. Takeshi gasped sharply, his entire body going rigid for a moment. Then he exhaled. Long and slow. The pain didn't disappear completely, but the sharp, unbearable agony was gone. "How does it feel?" Steven asked. Takeshi rotated his shoulder carefully. Slowly, testing it. "Better?" he said, surprise in his voice. "Much better." Steven handed him a towel and a bottle of water. "You'll be sore for a few days. Ice it tonight. Keep it elevated. No training for at least a week." "Thank you," Takeshi said quietly. "Sit, rest for a bit. Then we'll talk." 20 minutes later, Takeshi sat across from Steven in the dojo's small back office. His arm rested in a makeshift sling one of the students had fashioned from a spare G-belt. Steven poured 2 cups of green tea and slid one across the table. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Takeshi broke the silence. "I came here to prove you were a fraud," he admitted, his voice low. "I thought martial arts was about being the strongest, the fast, the most feared." Steven sipped his tea. "And now Takeshi stared into his cup. "Now I don't know what to think." Steven smiled gently. "Good. That means you're ready to learn. But I've been training since I was 6 years old. 22 years. How can I just start over?" "You're not starting over," Steven said. "You're evolving. Karate taught you discipline, power, focus, speed. Those things are valuable. They're real. But it also taught you to see everything as a fight to win. Isn't that what martial arts is, winning?" Steven set down his cup. "No. Martial arts is about protecting life, including your opponent's life. The moment you make it about ego, about proving you're better, you lose the art. You just become a fighter, and fighters get hurt." Takeshi touched his shoulder reflexively. "In Japan, my senseis taught me that losing is shameful, that a warrior never surrenders. Losing isn't shameful," Steven said firmly. "Refusing to learn from it is." Those words hit Takeshi harder than any throw, any lock, any technique ever could. He had spent his entire life afraid of weakness, afraid of being seen as inferior, afraid of admitting he didn't have all the answers. And in 30 minutes, this quiet American had stripped away all his illusions, not with cruelty, with truth. "Will you teach me?" Takeshi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Steven studied him for a long moment, reading his eyes, his posture, his energy. "I'll teach you," Steven said finally, "but not because you lost to me. I'll teach you because you're finally ready to listen." Takeshi felt something shift inside him. Not defeat, not shame, clarity. For the first time in his life, he understood the difference between being strong and being wise. "When do we start?" Takeshi asked. Steven smiled. "You already have. The moment you asked for help instead of revenge, you took your first step." Takeshi bowed his head deeply. "Thank you, Sensei." "Don't thank me yet," Steven said. "Real training is harder than any fight. It requires humility, patience, and the willingness to be a beginner again." "I'm ready," Takeshi said. And for the first time in 22 years, he truly meant it. Comment below, do you think humility is the hardest lesson to learn in life? Type Hamalubli if you agree. Type Prati if you think something else is harder. Let's discuss. Takeshi stayed in Los Angeles for 3 months. He didn't go back to Japan, didn't return to tournaments, didn't call his sponsors or his team or his manager. He didn't post on social media, didn't brag to his friends back home, didn't tell anyone what had happened in that dojo. He just trained. Every single morning at 6 a.m., he showed up at Steven's dojo. Rain or shine, sore or recovered, motivated or exhausted. Sometimes there were other students. Sometimes it was just the 2 of them. Steven didn't teach him flashy techniques. No spinning kicks, no dramatic throws, no Instagram-worthy moves. He taught him patience, balance, breath, how to feel energy before it became violence, how to redirect aggression without creating more aggression, how to win without fighting. And slowly, painfully slowly, Takeshi changed. Not just his techniques, his entire mindset. His strikes became softer but somehow more effective. His footwork became lighter, more fluid. His breathing became deeper, more controlled. But most importantly, his mind became quieter. The constant need to prove himself, the voice that had driven him for 22 years, began to fade. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into his training, Steven paired him up with another student for light sparring, a woman, maybe 5'4", mid-30s. She'd been training in Aikido for only 2 years. Takeshi hesitated. "Sensei, I don't want to hurt her." Steven's eyes crinkled with a smile. "Then don't. But she's smaller than you, weaker, less experienced." Steven finished. "Those are your assumptions. Let's test them." They bowed to each other. Takeshi moved carefully, trying to control his power, worried about his strength advantage. He threw a slow, controlled punch. She wasn't there. He tried a gentle grab. Before he knew what happened, his own momentum carried him forward, and he found himself face down on the mat, his arm gently controlled, her knee lightly pressing his shoulder, not with force, with positioning. The other students tried not to laugh. Takeshi got up, genuinely shocked. "How did you?" She smiled. "I didn't fight your strength. I just moved where you weren't expecting." They went again. This time Takeshi tried to use his footwork, his karate training, his speed. And again, she redirected him effortlessly, threw him gently, controlled him without effort, not because she was stronger, because she understood something he was just beginning to learn. After the 5th time hitting the mat, Takeshi didn't feel frustrated. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, joy. He laughed. A genuine, surprised, delighted laugh. "This is amazing," he said, slightly out of breath. "I've been doing martial arts my whole life and I never understood this." The woman helped him up. "Because you were fighting. Now you're learning." Steven watched from the corner, arms folded, a slight smile on his face. That night, as Takeshi iced his shoulder, still tender from the original injury, he sat alone in his small rented apartment and realized something profound. He had won 47 fights. But he had learned more from one loss than from all those victories combined. At the end of 3 months, Takeshi's visa was expiring. He had to return to Japan. On his last day, Steven gave him a gift. A small wooden box. Inside was a white belt. Takeshi looked at it, confused. "Sensei, I don't understand. You came here as a black belt in karate," Steven said. "And you still are. That knowledge is yours forever. But in Aikido, you're a beginner. This belt represents your willingness to start again, to be humble, to learn." Takeshi held the white belt in his hands, tears forming in his eyes. "I will wear it with honor," he said. "I know you will." They bowed to each other, deep, respectful, equal. Takeshi returned to Japan. But he was completely different. He opened his own dojo in Tokyo not to teach pure karate, but to blend it with Aikido's philosophy. He stopped competing, stopped chasing trophies, stopped measuring his worth by victories. Instead, he taught children, teenagers, adults who had been bullied, people who needed confidence but also needed wisdom. He taught them that strength without compassion is cruelty. That skill without humility is arrogance. That winning means nothing if you destroy others to do it. And every single year, on the anniversary of that day in Los Angeles, Takeshi sent Steven a handwritten letter, never asking for anything, just thanking him, not for the techniques, not for the training, but for showing him what it truly means to be strong. So what's the real lesson here? It's not that Aikido is better than karate. It's not that Steven Seagal is unbeatable. It's not even about martial arts techniques or fighting styles. The real lesson is this: true strength doesn't need to prove itself. Real power is knowing when not to use it. Think about it. Takeshi walked into that dojo with 22 years of training, 47 victories, a reputation as the Tokyo Demon. He had speed, power, skill, confidence, but he was missing something critical: wisdom. He thought respect had to be taken. That dominance was the same as mastery. That winning meant crushing your opponent. But Steven showed him something deeper. Respect is earned through humility. Power is controlled through discipline. And the greatest victory is the one that never requires a fight. You see, in life, we all meet people who challenge us, people who test our patience, push our buttons, question our abilities, disrespect our worth, and in those moments we have a choice. We can react with ego, prove we're right, prove we're stronger, prove we're better than them, or we can respond with wisdom, stay calm, stay grounded, stay true to who we are, and let our actions speak louder than our words. Steven didn't need to humiliate Takeshi. He could have broken his arm completely, could have embarrassed him in front of everyone, could have made him beg for mercy and posted it online for millions to see, but he didn't, because real masters don't create fear. They create understanding. Real strength isn't about how many people you can defeat. It's about how many people you can help become better versions of themselves. Steven could have sent Keishi home broken, bitter, and filled with resentment. Instead, he sent him home transformed, with a white belt, a new perspective, and a lesson that would change not just his life, but the lives of every student Keishi would ever teach. That's legacy. That's true power. And that's the kind of strength the world desperately needs more of. Because here's the truth that nobody talks about. The strongest people you'll ever meet are often the quietest. They don't start fights. They end them. They don't seek attention. They earn respect. They don't need to prove they're dangerous. Everyone already knows. They walk into rooms and the energy changes, not because they're aggressive, but because they're centered. That's what Steven had, and that's what Takeshi learned, not through words, through experience, through pain, humility, and the realization that everything he thought he knew was incomplete. So here's my question for you, watching this right now. When someone disrespects you, do you react or respond? Do you fight fire with fire, matching their energy, their anger, their aggression? Or do you stay calm, stay wise, and let your character do the talking? Do you need to win every argument, every confrontation, every challenge to your ego? Or are you secure enough in who you are to let some things go? Because the truth is, most fights aren't worth fighting. Most arguments aren't worth winning. Most people who disrespect you are dealing with their own pain, their own insecurity, their own demons. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is exactly what Steven did: stay calm, set boundaries, and if necessary, teach the lesson without destroying the person. That's mastery, not of martial arts, of life. Takeshi learned this at 28 years old. Some people never learn it. They go their whole lives thinking strength is about domination, about being feared, about never backing down, and they end up alone, bitter, surrounded by people who obey them but don't respect them. Don't be that person. Be the person who's strong enough to be gentle, confident enough to be humble, skilled enough to know when not to use those skills. Be the person who leaves others better than you found them. Even, especially, the ones who challenge you, because that's how you change the world. One interaction at a time, one lesson at a time, one moment of choosing wisdom over ego. If this story taught you something, type RESPECT in the comments right now. Tell me where you're watching from. I genuinely want to know who's part of this community. New York, London.